Hi, I'm David Hamburger, and I'm back with part 2 of my 6 steps to playing the changes on the blues. In this lesson, we're going to look at playing the swing scale in a different position and use it to create flowing 8th note lines. And I'm going to show you not just sort of how to make a few of them, but also where they belong over the course of a 12-bar blues, so that you're not trying to put them everywhere and you have just a few specific places where you know they're going to sound good and they're going to resolve and they're going to do what you want them to do. So let's get started. In part 1, we were down in the 6th position playing in the key of B flat. Now we're going to play in B flat up here. Same swing scale. I'm going to show you how to finger it. I think of this as the upper position just because when I was starting to transcribe and listen to Charlie Christian, it seemed like this was the more familiar place. You know, this is like the home position. It looks kind of like the pentatonic position that I learned first playing blues. And then I noticed, oh, he would go up here to play, you know, if he was in B flat, this would be the next place he would go. And so in my head, it's the upper position. And whether that really applies when you're moving these positions all over the neck, I don't know, but got to call it something. So that's what I'm calling it. So what it is, it's really coming out of the shape of this triad shape. Here's B flat. Here's the 5th and the root and the 3rd of B flat. And so if you're going to play the swing scale, going up you've got the root, the 2nd, the flat 3rd, the 3rd, the 4th, the flat 5th, and the 5th. And then going down, you've got the flat 7, the 6, and the 5. So got those kinds of sounds. Now you could take it all the way down to this root here, in which case you've got the root, flat 3, 3, 4, flat 5, 5, and then you're on into all of this. So that's the collection of sounds. It's all the same stuff, only you can go up a little higher. So there we are, and what we're going to do is use this to build some phrases that are a whole measure of 8th notes, so 8 8th notes in a row, and then connect those and include some pickups that lead into those phrases, some pickup phrases, so that it sounds more musical. So first thing is to look at a couple of phrases that we can play, and so here is one. Now what this does is it's coming down from the 5th, flat 5, 4, flat 3 to 3, to root, to 6, to 5, to 1. It's a really typical swing kind of lick, and it does this thing of kind of wrapping around the major 3rd. Even though you've got the flat 3 and the 3 in the scale, you really never go from the major 3rd to the flat 3rd as part of a phrase. It's always wrapping around, going to the flat 3rd and then back up to the major 3rd before you cross over to the root. So there's one phrase. Now, one other thing about the swing scale is that in addition to all the notes we've already got, you can also do a few chromatic moves. That is, you can add in a half step here and there between notes that are a whole step or 2 frets apart. So for instance, when you're coming from the root going down the scale, from the root to the flat 7 is a whole step, 2 frets. So you can stick in the major 7th in between to smooth things out. So, and some people call that right there just taking that scale and putting that half step in. Call that the bebop Mixolydian scale, because you're basically playing a Mixolydian scale with the major 7th in between the root and the flat 7. If the Mixolydian scale means nothing to you, don't even worry. Just pretend I didn't say the last minute of whatever I said. But that's one place you can put in a chromatic step. Then between the 6th and the 5th, you can also chromaticize that. So 6 to flat 6 to 5. And so a phrase that uses all of that might be something like, and so we're starting right on the downbeat, coming down root, major 7, flat 7, jumping over the 9, which is kind of a typical bebop move, and then 6, flat 7, 6, chromatically down to 5. And that last note resolves on the downbeat of the second measure of the lick. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Okay, so now we've got these two phrases, and we can actually string them together. And we could even keep going. We could play this first lick an octave down. So, and we could even play this one. Let's see if we have enough room. Yeah. So this is the thing. That's just two licks, but we've moved each of them down an octave. So now we've got all kinds of things we can connect up. We could play this. 1, 2, 3, and... and that's just climbing down, just descending. That gives us, just by learning these two licks and then figuring out how to play them an octave lower, now we've got 4 licks, and when we put them together, we've got 4 two-measure ideas. So that's a way to start building up a vocabulary of longer lines. And you can also, in the first part of the series, I talked about phrases that resolve into the downbeat, short phrases, right? And so you can also lead into these phrases that start right on the downbeat with a kind of a pickup phrase that resolves into the downbeat. So if you have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and like that, or so now we've got phrases that begin with a, they sort of lead into the downbeat, and you've got this long flowing phrase you can use. Now, the thing about all of this is, I know that when I started to try to play these longer, more flowing licks, I was like, where do they go? Like, am I supposed to play them all the time? You know, you want it to breathe and not sound like a typewriter, so there's a few considerations. There are basically, for now, let's say there's 3 good spots to put this kind of 8th note flow into one chorus of the blues. And the first spot is on the way into the 4 chord. So for bars 3 and 4, the first line of the blues, you're playing like, we just landed on the 4 chord. Let me play that over some actual changes so you can hear it in context, and I'll explain a little bit more about what's going on. So here we go. Now, the first thing I had to do was adjust for the fact that I was landing on the 4 chord at the end of all of that. So instead of playing here, because I'm about to, that's the moment when the rhythm section is hitting the 4 chord, is hitting the E flat. I want to land on a chord tone of E flat, and the closest one is the root, E flat. So I just changed the lick. Instead of doing this chromatic move down to 5, I just went back to scale tones. So I can go 1 note further and land on E flat. So once you learn these licks, you do have to do maybe a little bit of adjusting, particularly if you're landing on the 4 chord. Now, the next spot that you can start to stick one of these phrases in is in measure 6 going to measure 7. So that's, you've been playing on the 4 chord for a measure, and then you play one of these lines and resolve to a note that's in B flat, in this case the 5th. And that might not be the best one to do. Maybe it'd be better to do something like that lands back on the root. Might feel like a stronger resolution. But it's just 1 measure of 8th note flow and then resolving back to B flat. So let me play through the first 6 or 7 measures of the blues. I'll do the 8th note flow at the end of the first line, and then when I've been on the E flat for a measure, I'll play a pickup into bar 6, play a measure of eighth note flow and resolve back to B flat, which all sounds very complicated, but I think it'll sound pretty obvious when I do it. Here we go. So I'm using very similar phrases, but just so you can see where they're going to land and how they're going to do what they're going to do. Now the last place where you could use this in the 12-bar blues is I'm playing over a swing version of the blues changes, which means that when I get to the third line, to bar 9, the harmony is actually going not, let's see, B flat, not 5 to 4 to 1, but 2 to 5 to 1, which is something we're going to get into in a lesson coming right up. But for now, we just need to know that it doesn't really affect what we're playing, but just so you know, that's what the chord changes are doing underneath what I'm playing. But what we're going to do is, as soon as we get to bar 9, the beginning of the turnaround, in this case, G minor, let me see, C minor, going to F. That's where we can start to play this eighth note sound, and we're going to play 2 measures of it over the 2 chord to the 5 chord, and then resolve to the 1 chord. So we might have something like that. So again, let me roll the track. I'll play in the other 2 places I already did, and then when I get to the beginning of the turnaround, the third line, I'll play a pickup into 2 measures of eighth note flow that resolves back to the 1 chord when we get to the B flat in bar 11. Here goes. So those are the 3 big spots. Now there's one more thing that you can do, which is that we talked in the first, in part 1 in the lesson on the swing scale, about a delayed resolution where you land at the downbeat of a measure and then you keep playing. And so you could, when you resolve, when you're playing the turnaround and playing from the 2 chord to the 5 chord, back to the 1. Instead of just resolving, you could play 1 more measure of eighth note flow and carry through, so you resolve actually in the downbeat of measure 12, the last bar of the blues. So let me play through one more time, playing everything we've done, but what I'm going to do is just continue this one phrase that I'm playing when I get to the turnaround. Continue on with that line. You can hear how it carries over through the 1 chord. It sounds like this. So that is how to start to build up some of those eighth note lines, how to make them sound more musical by leading into them with a short pickup phrase, and most importantly of all, where to put them. And again, it can feel kind of, so specific, that it can feel maybe a little mechanical to be saying, well, we're going to play in these 3 spots. But it's a way of practicing improvising that I think is really valuable, where instead of guessing where you're going to put this stuff, you spend a little time practicing putting it in very specific places throughout the form, throughout the 12-bar blues. And then once you've been doing it for a while, you start to feel it more, you start to hear it more, you'll start to do it more intuitively from doing it more intentionally in the first place. So in the next lesson, in part 3, We're going to look at how to play over a 1-4-5 shuffle, but play the changes by applying a different swing scale to each of the 3 chords in the blues form. So I hope you'll come back and check that out. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.